co-host by the Irish Translators and Interpreters Association and the Ireland History Exchange here in Trinity College, where Ireland History Exchange is a constituent member of the Centre for Literary Translation. So, benvenuti a tutti, buonasera, è un piacere stare qui con 1, 2, 3, 4 scrittori, traduttori, italianistici, se si può dire. So it's a great pleasure to be here to introduce you to 4 translators, writers, doers, people who make relationships, literary relationships between Italy and Ireland happen. And all that remains for me to do today is to welcome you and to invite our chair for the evening, Giuliana Zeuli, translator extraordinaire, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you as well, Enrico Exchange, for facilitating the meeting, for putting up this fantastic display of Italian translations over the years. I introduced Mary Phelan, our chairperson, who was the other facilitator of the meeting. So thank you all for being here, turning up in this foul evening. We are nice and cozy here. I will introduce my colleagues here. Catherine Dunne is no introduction in Ireland, famous writer, more than welcome with us. Enrico Terrinoni teaches at the University of Perugia. He's finished the translation of Ulysses. He's embarked in Finnegan's Wake. That's just for the Irish side, and others and more, which he might tell us. Andrea Binelli teaches at the University of Trento, and his latest efforts in translation are Donald Ryan's The Spinning Heart, so a remarkable achievement. We'll start with Catherine. Okay, I was reading bits about your comments around, and I read this business that in any case of a woman writer, the chiclet issue comes up. And Catherine Dunne doesn't fit in chiclet, doesn't fit in any of the normal blocks where people try and square you in. My opinion is, Catherine Dunne is a bloody good writer and her book are bloody good reads. simply that, and the fact that they're constantly different means you open the book and it's a great surprise. It's like Christmas every time. But that's borne out by the huge success you've had, not only in Ireland, but abroad, in particular in Italy. So maybe you can tell us a bit of what happened, why Italy?
Sure. Well, thank you for those. Thank you for those kind words. First of all, I think probably the chiclet issue is beginning to subside just a little, particularly with the newer generations of particularly women writers who have found their voice in some extraordinary way since the crash. It's almost as though coming out of that appalling economic disaster that now younger women in particular, have found a voice which maybe wasn't there in such numbers beforehand. So I think that the identity, if you like, of women writers is beginning to shift just a little bit, which is only a good thing. Because for more years than I care to contemplate, probably coming up to close to 20, every time I or any of the women that I would associate with as writers, every time something was published, that was always the first question. Well, understood, you are female, so therefore you must write chiclet. So you had to define yourself first of all by what you were not, before you were able to describe what you were. So it was very frustrating. And there was a mania for pigeonholing. Well, if I can't call you chiclet, then what can I call this book? I said, well, you can call it a novel, actually, because that's what it is. And then you can decide what category you might like to shoehorn it into. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a novel. Take it on its merits, like it or love it, but please, stop trying to define it to be one thing or the other. And I just find that this is really interesting for me, this book here, because this was actually republished yet again. This is in the beginning. And the publishers brought out a limited edition in 2012 to celebrate an anniversary of the publishing house. And when I saw it, I had to smile, because what I've been fighting against here in Ireland and the UK is a bloody pink cover. But this was a different kind of pink for a different reason, so I was quite happy with that. So when I finished the book in 1995, it then went with my agent to the Frankfurt Book Fair. no idea what publishing was all about. I was completely ignorant, I knew nothing. I was just delighted that my first book had been accepted by Jonathan Cape in London. Oh, this is great, I'm going to have a book come out, which had taken only 12 years to write, so it was wonderful to see that it was actually going to be between covers. And then it went to the Frankfurt Book Fair, and suddenly I started getting these phone calls saying, well, Italy has bought it, Denmark has bought it, Germany has bought it. I had no idea what any of that meant.
It was a bit like Eurovision, wasn't it?
Just a bit.
Many points.
So it was extraordinary because it was completely unexpected. I had no idea even what would happen. I knew obviously books were bought and sold at a book fair. I'd never been to Frankfurt. I've spoken to Sinead about this before. She and others have described it in different ways as almost like the horse show without the horses. You know, it's just such a chaotic kind of jamboree of people. So I was absolutely thrilled about this. So the first publication of In the Beginning was in Italy, also in 1997. And the book for me, it's a first novel with all of the faults and all of the freshness of a first book. And you know, I owe it a great deal. But it had arisen out of my experiences of being an Irish woman working my way through 2 different divorce referenda. The first one which had failed, and the second one which came so astonishingly close.
We did our best.
Yes, indeed. So when I came to work on the campaign the second time round, what distressed me was the fact that here were the same stories that I had come across in the previous referendum. Here they were in all their sadness and all their lack of coherence and all their sad, open endings because there was no closure to a relationship. And I had been writing 4 intertwining stories for a number of years, which of course was way too much for a first-time writer to try and grapple with. So working my way through that campaign, coming up against the same stories again and again, suddenly the picture of Rose, just the one individual, the one story, seemed to me, this is the one I'm going to follow. That was the one that kind of called to me, became compelling.
Because writers say that sometimes the characters take on their own life, don't they? For film, they take over.
For me, they do. I know for a lot of writers, will dismiss that and say, no, you're totally in control of your characters. Well, I'm not, because they come into my head and they colonise me, and I generally go where they say. So I killed off her 3 friends, I'm sorry to say. So Rose survived. And I think what actually touched a chord, I mean, although there was certainly divorce available in Italy, I think the circumstances of the kind of the abrupt end of a relationship, not the ending itself, but the lack of dignity to an ending where somebody simply walks out and says, well, you know, or doesn't even say, but by their absence says, you're on your own now, I don't want to have anything else to do with you. And for us that had been what we called at the time, and I think a lot of people will remember this, here it was called divorce Irish style, because men took the boat and disappeared to London somewhere and never to be seen again. Obviously it wasn't the same geographical desertion, they may have stayed in their country, but the experience of a lot of women was this, of the undignified end of a relationship, and that this story had never been told. And for me that was important, because when I started to write, when I was, you know, a teenager, when I was in my 20s, and writing all the time, all of the literature that I had access to from my own country was male and rural. I was female and urban. So while I admired the writing and I was always a voracious reader, I read everything that came my way, it was, this isn't my life, these aren't my stories. And it was the discovery of 6 months that I spent in Canada in their magnificent public library system, where I came across Margaret Atwood and Carol Shields and Alice Munro and all of the wonderful Canadian women who were writing at that time. And their stories were based around women like me, like the people I knew, trying to manage careers, relationships, children, friendships, all of the complexities. And I thought, these are the sort of stories that I want to tell. And that's really, this is when it started to grow.
So again, you have to go a long way to come back.
Yes,
tell your own story.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Equally the case.
And that kind of, you know, that sort of writing journey for me obviously is fascinating, because it never ends. Because I think it's the Vietnamese who have the saying that the longest journey is the inward one. So you're always trying to find out, you know, what makes you tick and what makes So this struck a chord. There was a resonance, you know, with people's lives. Not the best book in the world, but when people read it at a particular time in their life and it says something about something that they're going through, then the book becomes something else. And we were discussing that on the way walking here this evening. When a book, for me, when a book leaves my computer, it is a text. That's all it is. It's a text which I have written. It becomes a novel, it becomes a reading experience when a reader picks it up and reads it. And everybody who comes to it has a different response, so it becomes a different novel. So, you know, the journey is endless.
Yes.
And fascinating because of that.
Absolutely. And in breaking in the success that you had in Italy, there was a fortuitous circumstance, wasn't there?
There was. God bless Mr. Berlusconi. Well, indeed, what happened was the book started to sell, excuse me, very well. I knew nothing about what numbers meant. When I went over the first time, the publisher said to me, we're very happy, it has sold 14,000 copies. Well, that sounded like an awful lot of copies to me, but then there are an awful lot of people in Italy, so it didn't really, you know, it didn't seem that it was a runaway bestseller or anything. And he said, no, we're not interested in bestsellers, we're interested in long sellers. And it kept below the radar for a long time, but just sold steadily and steadily and steadily. And then in 2006, I was living in Spain, and I think actually early 2007 I got a phone call from a friend of mine who lives in Rome to say, you're all over the newspapers today.
Hippie.
I said, but what did I do? I'm not even there, I'm in Spain. I couldn't figure who could, what was going on. Anyway, it transpired that this was the occasion when Veronica Lario, Mr. Berlusconi's long-suffering spouse, had had enough. And he had propositioned a young woman at a TV event the previous night. And the opposition were there, and they thought, well, he's doing this in public, it's fair game. So he was filmed making his proposition, he was quoted, and it was all over the newspapers the following day. So his wife wrote, I'm sure with assistance, but it was a magnificent letter. She wrote an open letter to La Repubblica saying that she was tired of being humiliated, and that this man was a father of growing up children, and was this any example to give to sons or daughters as to how women should be treated. So she really, it was a very, very hard-hitting letter. I thought it was beautifully expressed. It was clearly from the heart, which is not to say that that's all it was, because I think we all realised it was the first salvo in a very expensive divorce campaign, and so it proved.
Bitter and long drawn out.
Absolutely, and yes, very costly. But what I enjoyed, I think, more than anything was the footage where she had said to him that he had refused to apologise to her in private. So now, as he had insulted her in public, she demanded a public apology. And they were actually filmed going into a restaurant together. It was the loudest body language I've ever heard in my life. And the man did not want to make the apology. So in this letter, one of the things she said was, you have made me feel like the character in Catherine Dunn's novel. You have made me feel half of nothing, which was the title.
Which is the Italian title, yes. One half of nothing.
So that started, I think everybody in the publishing house got up about 5 o'clock that morning. We went and had books reprinted and had them delivered to shops, and it got a whole new lease of life thereafter. You couldn't make it up.
How many zeros to the 14,000?
Quite a few, quite a few. But you know, you couldn't make up something like that. So I suppose it's also, you know, when it comes down to stories are how we try and make sense of the world. Not only writers, all of us, it's how we try and make sense of the world. And you know, this was something that touched a chord at a particular time, and then was given legs by various other different circumstances. And I think, you know, we're in excess of 500,000 copies at this stage, but that is since 1997. I'm not a
long
millionaire
sellers,
yet.
long sellers.
Long sellers. So long may she continue.
Yes, indeed. So this was your first experience of being translated?
Yes, and then that was followed by the Danish edition, which is here. This one here, which I thought was lovely. They got a Danish artist to do the cover.
Yes, yes, yes.
And made me a gift actually of the original painting. And I'm always fascinated by the different approaches that different publishers will take.
That's very thoughtful.
It's very,
You
yes.
should catch. You should make it known.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
that could happen.
And that was followed, there was the Italian, the Danish and the German. And the German was, German is not the happy ending of the story. Because what happened with the German publication was the man who bought it for Goldman, which is a very well-renowned publisher, bought it, had great plans to publish it, and then suddenly, about 3 months before the book was due to go out, or to come out rather, he moved company. And all of his projects, literally, and this happens to writers all the time. It just sank, it just fell between several stools, so nothing ever happened. But obviously that those two were very happy events.
Lucky on one side and not so lucky on the other.
Yeah.
Did it ever come out?
It came out with an appalling cover in a very limited quantity. It had, I mean, this is an urban story, as I've been talking about. It came out with the cover, I mean, the worst Irish cover you could possibly think of, with this kind of cottage, a thatched cottage on the side of a mountain, with the rain streaming down. I wouldn't have bought it in a bit. So.
They obviously never read it.
Yeah.
But I know one thing that the author has a veto on, and that is the cover. Or maybe you didn't know at that stage.
Well, it wasn't even, I mean, normally what happens is, it's not a veto as such. Let's just say if you don't like something, there will be a discussion, but sometimes you're overridden anyway.
Right, okay.
And I never even saw this because I certainly would have said no. And I think what happened was, in order to fulfill a contract, they issued the book with anything. It was just to say we have fulfilled the contract.
There was a deadline.
And that was it. So I kept the one copy. I look at it from time to time to remind me, you know, this is what can happen and
Next
does
time,
happen
check
over
the
and
cover.
over again. So whereas was Poland, Albania for some extraordinary reason, and with a cover by Edward Hopper. Go figure, I have no idea. It looks very nice, it looks extremely nice. And Sweden, that was for one of the later books, but we were discussing that earlier, which was a very interesting, particularly with the audience here. Do you want to bring somebody else in at this stage?
No, it's fine.
This story, because of the audience particularly, I had a very good Swedish friend who was living here for many years, and my third novel was called The Walled Garden, which was a story of a mother and daughter, told mostly through letters, because the daughter arrives home too late, the mother is terminally ill. They've never understood each other. So it's quite it's a sort of a subtle back and forth, you know, there's no explosions, there's nothing major happens. It's all of the nuances of their relationship. And it did very well here, it did very well in Italy, it did very well elsewhere, and was translated into Swedish. And my Swedish friend bought it in Swedish and had me sign it to give to her sister. And she rang me a couple of days later and said the translation is absolutely appalling. It is appalling. And she said, I'm not giving it to anybody. I think we should just let this one quietly die. I've never sold a book in Sweden since, and that was
And that's
15 years ago.
damaging.
Very damaging. Said it was flat and pedestrian and dull, and subtlety became flat and pedestrian and dull. So nothing happened with that book. But there you go.
So let's hear it for good translators.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The success of the book is definitely in Parma.
Yeah, it's a huge factor, because it's not translation as such. It's reimagining. It's rewriting.
It's another baby that comes out.
It's another art.
Text.
Absolutely. Yes.
Comments from.
Did you ever tell the publisher, that the Swedish publisher, that the submission was...
No, we had no contact whatsoever.
And they probably never bought another title.
No, that was it. That was the end of it.
Yeah. So you weren't even given the opportunity of other entries.
I mean, obviously, clearly if something is as badly translated as that, it's not going to sell.
Definitely.
So if it's not going to sell, you're not going to get the opportunity. Even though the next one might have been better translated and might
But
have sold, but that's always the dilemma.
Because sometimes you just check the sales, don't think that the fault is the way it's translated.
Yeah.
It's appalling. I apologize
Yeah. Oh
for
no,
the category.
no, it's just, for me it was a really interesting lesson, which is why when I won the literary prize in Italy in 2013, I donated 25% of the prize to the translator.
Yeah.
Because I figured this is, because it's what was done with the impact here.
This was done, with the impact is
I was a judge on that, and got to understand how important that was to reward good translation, and also to kind of raise the conversation in Italy, where I know particularly that translators are paid extremely badly and work under enormous pressure. I don't know how much better it is here, but certainly they're huge pressure, huge speed, and very, very badly paid. So I thought, well, if I make a public gesture like this...
I think it mattered. I think it would
then it
got
gets
an echo in the press.
Exactly.
There are other writers, actually, who very often give their translators a proportion of the royalties they get into the market, because it's automatic. They automatically acknowledge that the success in that market is due to another author.
Absolutely.
And there are brilliant examples. Unfortunately, not many authors think like that, but let's talk about the good examples. In the case of Joyce, too late.
Too late. Let me just say that Joyce is cheated.
Joyce is cheated.
So this is the... no, Joyce was is dead, so there's no way to get money out of him. But I must say that this is also an advantage, to translate dead people. Like when you translate, you're lending your voice to somebody else. This somebody else might be a living person or a dead one. And I like Ireland a lot. And every time I translate some living author, they die.
Stay away! Dangerous.
That's why I don't want to translate living Irish. Like I did Muriel's Park, the last book. She died like a week after. Last summer, I was doing Lanark by Alistair Gray, and the guy fell off the balcony. So I don't want to do it.
Don't try to translate me, have you, Enrico?
So no, that's why I want to do it. I did Brendan Behan, then I did Joyce. The only Irish writer that I did was Mannix Flynn, actually.
Right.
That book about, nothing to say, that book about child abuse.
His experiences,
in industrial schools. But is he alive yet?
Oh yes, he is, yes. So up until today, I think, yes.
The translation is not enough.
Yeah. So I don't know, I mean, I'm mainly a translator of Joyce, although I do other stuff. Like at the moment I'm doing this American writer called Chris Cotton. He wrote a book about mines in Kentucky and Colorado, very good book. But I'm mainly a translator of Joyce, and this is a problem because Joyce shouldn't be, some books by Joyce shouldn't be translated, let's face this. Like Finnegan, I'm doing Finnegan's Wake now, but I was telling this to Christine, it's just unethical to translate Finnegan's Wake because those books cannot be done, like when you have a book written in many languages, what do?
Would you say it's a translation in itself? Because
it is. It is many things, it is a translation. It should be translated into English first, and it is a book that of which we scholars, Joyce, understand a part. We don't understand the full thing. There's some things that are not clear, not even to the experts. So, but then I said to myself, they have it in North Korean, they have it in Chinese. Joyce lived in Italy for many years, so I think we owe it to him, to do a translation of Finnegan's Wake. But by the same token, when the publisher contacted me, the story was, they started doing Finnegan's Wake 20, 30 years ago. And the one translator managed to accomplish the first 2 books of Finnegan's Wake, then he died. So they called me, I said, do you want to finish the job? And then I asked, what happened to the other translator?
I think we should close.
So I said, no, I'm not going to do it. It's ridiculous. No single person can do this work. Then they put pressure on me because my Ulysses did very well. So they wanted to it sold a lot. They wanted to, kind of have the same success with Finnegan's Wake. And then I told them that I was going to do it only if I could work with somebody else. So that if I'm falling off the back, it gets me in. So there's two people working on the same book.
And
it's not
it
even-
deserves two minds, doesn't it?
It deserves many because
there are so many voices in it.
there are so many, as I said, so many things that are, I wouldn't say unclear, but some things that could be understood in a way or in another, especially when Joyce writes in a language that reads and looks English, but it's not. Like he writes stuff that come from other languages. And if I give you an example, there's a word in Finnegan's Wake which is kurstafist, which means basically it's a concept in a post-famine concept that the Irish people after the famine didn't want to. I mean, if an English person offered something to them, they would say no because it's coming from the hands of the enemy. And this concept is summarized in the word kurstafist, which in Italian is guastafeste. I'm sure that this word is guastafeste is spoil sport. Somebody. So Joyce did that all the time because he taught in Italian. He lived in Italy for many years, and his son and daughters were called Giorgio and Lucia, not George and Lucy. He would speak Italian to them, so Italian was the family language. So what happened with him was that at some stage, like all of us, when you live for some time in a different place, in a foreign country, you start dreaming in that language, and that happened to Joyce. So the reason why some things in his books are very difficult from an English-speaking point of view, especially syntactically, is because he's actually thinking in a different syntax sometimes. I'm talking of, for example, of the 14th chapter of the episode of Ulysses at the very beginning, those very long sentences. A lot of friends can't make sense of the syntax, whereas syntax is plain to me because it's Latin syntax. So this is why it shouldn't be translated, because what can you do with it? You can only rewrite the text, but each of us can write it in different ways. So in a way, it's a very easy text. It's the easiest text to translate because you can do what you like about it. But on the other hand, as I said, it's you don't want to. I mean, I would never advise any reader to buy a translation of